In this video, we'll be going over the memorization approach of Decode ways. Let's go over the thought process. In the recursive approach, the solution is very inefficient due to overlapping recursive calls. We can avoid overlapping recursive calls using memorization. Now we have to ask ourselves, what do we need to cache? In each of the recursive call, we are trying to find the number of ways we can decode at index I. This means we can cache I with the number of ways. Let's go over the pseudocode. So we're going to create an array, Memo, to cache previously calculated results. The indices represents I, and the values represents ways. We're going to fill Memo with -1. This is to prevent a case where the input string cannot be decoded. This means zero ways to decode the input string. Then we can implement the top-down memorization approach. And then we'll pass in our Memo, our cache. And then what's the base case is if Memo I is not equal to -1. This means we have already calculated the results for the index I. Then we can just return Memo I. And then after all this, we're going to cache the number of ways at Memo I. So we're going to put ways at Memo. And then we can return Memo I, which is the number of ways at the current index I. We can delete this. Now let's go over the time and space complexity. So the time complexity is O of n plus n. So let's go to O of n, where n is the length of the input array. So the first O of n is to fill Memo with -1. And the other one is there are n possible states in the recursive calls. And our space complexity is O of 2 times n, which is equal to O of n. This is the Memo and recursive call stack memory. Let's go over the code. So we're going to create an array Memo to cache previously calculated results. And then we're going to fill Memo with -1. And then we'll pass it into our recursive calls. If Memo I is not equal to -1, this means we have already calculated the number of ways for the index I. Then we can just return the result. Else, we want to cache it at the end. We want to pass our Memo to also our other recursive calls. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below.